Today's interview is with Evan Polaski. Evan actually went to university to study business, but with a focus on real estate. I thought that was really interesting. He then went to work for a commercial real estate owner, handling investor relations and also capital raising. All the while then he started investing in single family homes, single family rentals. He dabbled a little bit with some flipping, which he still does. Then he also went to work for Ashcroft Capital, for Joe Phyllis's company, doing the same thing, handling investor relations and capital raising. So that's what he currently does now. And he also talks about how and why he invests passively. He loves passive investing. So that's one of his main focuses now. So really fascinating interview. Really enjoyed talking to Evan. As always, like and subscribe on Wrestling with Real Estate on the YouTube channel. If you enjoy it on the WWRE podcast, give me a 5-star rating and write me a review. I would really appreciate that. And also it's available on wrestlingwithrealestate.com. So a lot to dive into in the interview today, so enjoy. To Wrestling with Real Estate, where we look to choke slam all your real estate problem. I'm your host, former WWE wrestler and now Cirque du Soleil performer, and of course, multifamily real estate investor, Barri Griffiths. Now today we're joined by Evan Polaski. Did I say that right?
Polaski. Close.
Polaski. Sorry. But thanks for being here today, Evan. In sunny Cincinnati, or is it rainy Cincinnati?
No, it's pretty sunny today. It's pretty pleasant.
Okay, so I'm sure it's a lot more pleasant here in Vegas. It's been hitting like 114 yesterday, so yeah, it's probably going to be the same today. So I'll stay.
So you'll stay inside.
Yeah, stay inside. Yeah. So thanks for being here today. Thanks for agreeing to do this interview. I know you're a very busy guy, so I appreciate you giving us the time. Do you want us to give us a little bit about your background and what you're focusing on now?
Yeah, so I'm a real estate investor. I actually went through the University of Cincinnati's undergrad business program with a focus on real estate. Outside of that, graduated and went right to work for a commercial real estate owner where I was doing investor relations and capital raising from 2007 right into the recession of 2009-10, and kind of bounced around a little bit. But in that process, also started buying my own single family rentals, single families with one duplex in the portfolio over from 2011 through 2014, and then got into flipping as well, all while running a fitness business. And then just recently started making the transition from direct single family ownership into more passive investing. And also around that same time, moving from the fitness business and running the flips with my wife to working for Ashcroft Capital on their investor relations team.
So he likes to stay busy then, it sounds like.
We try to, with 2 small kids in the mix and wife. It's fun time.
So I'm guessing you don't sleep, right? That's the secret.
No, because the kids fall asleep early.
Okay.
So I'm a 10 to 5 sleeper, and up at 5.
Okay. Cool. Well, there's a lot of interesting stuff in there. I think it's really interesting that you went to college for technically real estate, right? What did they teach? What was that degree about?
So yeah, my degree was a business degree. So I have a bachelor's of business administration. But then within UC's program, University of Cincinnati, you could pick what they call a focus and an integral. So my focus was in finance. Those are kind of your core business functions: accounting, financing, finance, marketing, etc. And then the integral is more of like a cross-functional type focus. So in that case, it was real estate for me. They had entrepreneurship, international business was one, but I picked real estate. And it's really just been, so what they taught was, honestly, I felt like I got more finance understanding out of the real estate program than I did out of my finance courses, or at least practical. Learning how the time value of money and how to calculate mortgage payments and payoff amounts when you're, 24 months into a 30-year mortgage. What's the balance, and how can you confirm that the bank's giving you the right number? So there's lots of fun stuff with that again was much more practical knowledge than now I don't even remember, but the traditional finance background of alpha and beta and how to value stocks and stuff like that. So it was a good program, but it was definitely finance focused in its coursework.
Right. And it sounds like you've always been interested in real estate, I guess. Then, right? It was, most people later on in life. I know it was later on in life when I found real estate, and it seems to be a case that not necessarily when they go to school that they understand real estate. What do you think it was that interested you in real estate from such an early age?
I don't, as we're talking a little bit before hitting record, it's kind of been an innate thing where I've just always noticed properties and buildings and think, oh, would it be cool to own that big, tall office building downtown? And obviously as a kid, you're not thinking of it as I'd have a $100 million asset. You're just thinking like, it'd be cool to own something. Like that's how I thought about it. And obviously as you grow, you start to learn that you can't own everything, for one. And it doesn't make sense to own everything. But as I've grown, I have also learned that everything has a price. And sometimes you might need to not waste your time, but just let somebody know that here's the price I'm willing to offer to make a deal work. But again, back to being a kid, it was, I just always noticed them and was envious of them, whether it was the strip center with the grocery anchor, with the grocery stores, the anchor, or the apartment complex, or the hotel, or the high-rise downtown building. It was just, wouldn't it be cool to own that? It was just something I always thought.
Yeah, well, that's cool. That's to be that interested from an early age and to be doing what to work in that is a cool story, I think. You said then that when you left college, you went to work for a commercial real estate company, and you worked from them from 2007 to 10. Is that correct?
2007 to 2009.
Okay.
And then when I graduated college, I was one of the very fortunate people to find a job that kind of specifically aligned with my degree. So I had to find, a business degree with a focus in finance and real estate, and a national operator that was also happened to be based in Cincinnati was launching their second institutional private equity fund. And so I was brought on board as the analyst to help in that capital raising capacity, as well as that same team was managing all the investor relations for their for the assets they currently own and the investors that were currently in those deals. So it was an investor relations capital raising type role that I absolutely loved. Of course, at the time, I didn't value how much I enjoyed it, because I saw the leasing agents, the sales guys, and I was like, oh, wouldn't it be cool to have an expense account and go out and just like be on the road and talk to people all day? So when I got laid off, downsized in the last recession, I actually found a leasing role in retail, and that was 2009 to 10, and very quickly learned that it is a tough road that they do. Like, it's not easy. So thankfully in 2010 was able to go back to the original company. And in that experience, I was on the finance side, but on the debt side. So I was helping raise, refinancing and acquisition loans on the portfolio and new properties. So kind of came full circle in that regard. And that lasted a few more years before I had the opportunity to take over actually a CrossFit gym, a fitness facility.
That I think that time period is, looking back, it was probably a tough time for you maybe and businesses at the time. But I think it, where we are now with things, who knows what's going to happen next, right? But there's, seems like there might be some pain and some somewhat similarities, and no recession is ever the same, right? But maybe talk to us a little bit how things were in the commercial space from 2007 to 2009, what you saw.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely went from high of the highs to low very quickly. That was my first job out of college, so I didn't have a lot of experience before then. But you just saw, well, we were in the middle of a capital raise. So we were looking to raise, I think our goal was $500 million of institutional equity to buy shopping centers, grocery anchored shopping centers. And when I first started there in 2007, we kind of hit the road, went to our existing investors first, or from the first institutional fund that we had done, got lots of recommitments, starting to get traction. They're referring people to us. We're raising money pretty well. And it was slamming on the brakes, because when you're dealing with institutional people, institutional investors, they have chief investment officers, they have specific asset allocations that they need to hit. So you go to a CalPERS, the California Public Employee Retirement System, the largest pension fund in the country. And they have a pie chart that says this much can be real estate, this much needs to be stocks, bonds, other alternatives, et cetera. Well, what we ran into in a very fast, from kind of like March of 16 or March of this year, the stock market crashed very quickly. And so all of a sudden that equity chunk that was supposed to be called 45% became 15% of the total portfolio. So now they need to rebalance everything. So not only can they not allocate new money to real estate because the denominator of the whole portfolio got smaller, so they're over allocated in real estate, but they actually need to start disposing of some of their holdings in real estate to try to rebalance the portfolio. So I'm not saying that's the right or wrong way to do it, but when you're trying to raise money specifically for real estate, it makes it painful because they're trying to manage to an allocation, not allocate based on where good returns are going to be coming from in the foreseeable future. So that's one thing that I do enjoy now, where I'm dealing with individuals who, yes, they want to allocate some money to real estate, but they're not playing that same game of oh, well, I need to keep only 25% to real estate. In their mind, they might be thinking that, but generally they're a little more fluid because it's a one-man show. It's them controlling their own portfolio.
Yeah. Well, when you mentioned investor relationship and raising capital, usually, you hear 5 million, maybe 10 million, but to hear of a $500 million raise, that's a different level right there, right? Talk to us about.
And this was definitely this was not a startup company by any means. They've been around since 1992. So they definitely had a good track record, good portfolio, still do. And so, yeah, I mean, it's just the scale that you have, as you have that background and track record, you are able to collect bigger checks at a time.
Well, yeah, I think that would be interesting. I know from a selfish point of view, I would love to hear, what does a 500 million raise look like, right? Do you have a minimum? Is it a five, usually?
Yeah. Yes. When you're talking institutional, there is, again, it's been so long, I can't remember the minimum, but I remember we allowed one person into the first institutional fund they did, which they used a placement agent, so an investment bank, to raise the capital for them. There was a group that they had met with that the group didn't end up investing in the fund that they're raising, but one of the principals really liked the strategy, so he invested $1 million. But he was the smallest investor by, I think we had a couple $5 and $6 million investors, but a lot of those checks become, what would that be? Like $10+ million is your typical amount that an institution is going to be writing a check for. So again, it's just it's a different beast. There's pros and cons, like there is with everything.
Yeah. How do they structure that? I'm guessing it's probably not a preferred return on something like that, or is it?
No, it's actually very similar to what you'll see in syndications. you're still offering a PPM. There's still a waterfall. Yeah, I mean, honestly, all the terms are right in line. It's really just mostly some of the numbers might change a little bit. And again, it's not out of line with what people see in syndications where they're raising from private individuals in that sense. It's just, the one big difference that we would see is because you're taking such big investments, and these are institutions that have very complex tax matters that they need to deal with and stuff like that, that instead of just you have your one form, you have your subscription document, but then you have what's called a side letter. That's sort of so you don't have to have a whole bunch of unique PPMs and subscription agreements and limited partnership agreements. Those are all the same. And then the side letter handles all I am a foreign entity, so I need XYZ treatment on this matter. And you just kind of handle those on their own. But it ends up being, again, it's been over a decade now since I was doing it, but you're talking 12 investors, maybe 20. So it's not out of the realm of an administrative possibility to handle those kind of unique situations versus, say, a syndication where the minimum investment's $50,000 and you end up having 250 people in a deal. If you had 250 unique things you had to report or do or handle in a certain way, I don't know of any firm that could handle that. It would just be an administrative nightmare.
Yeah, I'm sure I can see the differences there. But it's just, at the end of the day, they're just zeros, right? At the end of a thing, right? It's kind of the same process to some extent, right? It's like buying a 10-unit property versus buying a 100-unit property, right?
It's funny you say that, because my boss, the very first job, she was my boss, so she was working capital raising, investor relations. But when she first got hired onto the company, when they were only 4 or 5 years old, she was their main accountant, their first inside accountant versus using outside, CPA firms. And she told me the story of one of the principals talking to her and saying, hey, it's exactly what you've always done. Just basically you add a zero to the end, maybe 2 zeros. So instead of a $10,000 check, you're writing a $100,000 check or $1 million check, but still the same thing. Me having worked in it now for 13 years, it has definitely skewed my view of money. Not personally, because I still, am an average person, but when you deal with these deals, it's like, yeah, a $50 million asset, okay, like that's fine.
Yeah,
there's nothing too unique about that,
right? Yeah,
and it's just the nature of the business.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Yeah, because I remember when I started looking into multifamily and apartment complexes, I'd see this, excuse me, I'll see these $1 million properties, and I'm like, the $1 million, the fact that it was $1 million, regardless if it was an amazing deal or whatever, the fact that it was $1 million used to blow me away. And I was like, $1 million? Like, how can I buy this? How can I afford this? How can I run this? How can I buy a property that's $1 million? But in reality, you soon learn that, that's not a big property anymore. It's not even a $10 million property, right? Necessarily isn't, we listen to podcasts, and we obviously are involved in the business, and our good friend Joe is buying $50 million properties, like it's nothing almost. So it's just, it really does skew you, because you talk to a normal person, and even a $500,000 property is a lot, and then you just kind of, these numbers, you just realize that it's just a zero, right? Just like that story you explained, and a zero never killed anyone, as far as I know. So
no, it's like I said, as you start working in real estate, whether it's the single family world or the 450 unit properties, you start to realize how a lot of money doesn't go very far. And unfortunately, that's just the nature of the beast today. It's, even on single family flips that my wife and I do, it's our renovation budgets on the last several have been into the $100,000. And you talk to a non-real estate person, you're like, yeah, I had to write a check today for $50,000. Like, what would you possibly do with $50,000? Like, that's as much as I make in a year. Yeah. And it's like, that got me a roof and some siding, and like my plumbing reworked.
Yeah.
You know, it just is.
Yeah.
But again, not to discount the value of money, because it takes a lot of work, and obviously you're putting a lot of money at risk when you are doing $50 million deals, even $500,000 deals. It's all just the scale and scope of what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So interestingly, you decided, and you still flip, or you did flip. Why did you decide that flipping was, you know, obviously being involved in these large deals and being, you know, in the commercial space? What made you decide that flipping was something you wanted to get into?
It's my wife's passion. Ironically, in our world, she went to school for fitness, exercise science, and was working for a diet and fitness website. So that was kind of her undergrad and into early in her career. I went to school for real estate and was working in real estate. When my son was born, or right around that time, I left real estate to buy, as I mentioned, a CrossFit gym from some friends, and was running that full time. So that was my full time small business owner gig. She left the corporate world when my son was born, and as he was becoming about a year old, one of the members of my gym was a flipper, and she had always been interested in design and flipping, and actually started college right out of high school in interior design. So there was a period of time where I'm working in fitness, having gone to school for real estate, and she's working in real estate, having gone to school for fitness. But ultimately, it all came back around. And like I said, she's been a designer at heart from a long, you know, forever. And it was, as we had I bought some rentals in the 2010-11 era, and they were doing well and good, but she kind of wanted to get into flipping, and it was a good opportunity to sell a couple rentals for a profit. And we took that money and rolled it in and kind of had our hand at flipping. So we are definitely not full-time flippers. I'll say we typically will do 1, maybe 2 flips a year, but it's been something that has A, done well for us, especially given the market. And then B, it gives my wife something to do outside of raising our kids, because she, you know, we're fortunate enough that she can stay home and raise our kids full time, but everybody needs a break from being a full-time parent. So it lets her kind of exert, or, you know, display her creativity and create something that she enjoys doing as well.
Nice. Very cool. Happy wife, happy life, right?
100%.
So then you also mentioned that you now currently invest passively a lot, or you have in the past.
I've started getting into it more.
Right. What brought that on? What was the thought process because obviously you've worked for this large company doing large deals. You have that experience. You guys do flips. You know, you have that experience. You bought some single family homes yourself. Mm-hmm. So you have all this experience, and of being active, and, you know, I'm sure done very well. How did that decision process go to that now I want to be more passive?
It started coming around. So there's kind of a twofold aspect to it. Like I said, I started buying single family rentals in 2011. So we're coming up on a decade of doing it. Mm-hmm. So that's part A. And, you know, just kind of getting tired. I never, I think it was about 18 months that I hired a third-party manager for my small portfolio of single family rentals. And at the end of the day, I maybe just barely made money that 18 months, because the management companies I had 4 of them.
Wow.
None of them did well. So not a huge fan of third-party management on the small portfolio side of things. Not to say people don't have great success with it. So I'm not saying all managers are bad. It's just the ones that I had weren't great. So there's the management side, and generally my portfolio was good. I had good tenants, long-term tenants. I think my average turnover was about 3.5 years. So like, it's not like I'm turning these units every 6 months. But it started getting to be just the weight of, it's raining, am I gonna get a roof leak? Mm-hmm. Or am I going to get a plumbing leak today, or like a clogged toilet that the tenant can't plunge? Like, just, I wasn't even getting the calls. It was just starting to do that, to be that. And then additionally, as you get more conservative and as you grow in the business, you realize that when you started, you didn't account for everything. As I've mentioned on Bigger Pockets many times, a brand new roof today still has to be replaced at some point. And you can reserve today, or you can find that $8,000 when you need it, but it's going to cost you $8,000. And when I really started looking at an apples to apples comparison, like I said, I self-managed, so the cash flow is pretty good, but I'm answering calls, leasing spaces, managing contractors when repairs are needed, et cetera, et cetera. And so I plug back in my 10% management fee, my 1 month commission on new leases with a half month on renewals, but then ultimately looking at my CapEx and repair budgets and saying, I need to reserve $250 to $300 a month, because the property is going to need to be repainted in 10 years. The kitchen's going to need to be renovated in 15 years. The roof, 25 years. I can save for that all now. And that's what it added up to. I put my big spreadsheet together. And so I'm looking at my returns and I'm like, I've got a lot of equity in these deals because I bought them in the recession. And I'm not making that much money if I were to truly go passive. I can make more in a preferred return on a syndication. And I still get the upside. And I don't have to answer calls. So that was the big impetus, was just looking at my almost return on equity on a true cash flow basis, I am fully reserved, if not slightly over reserved. I have a management fee, I have real estate taxes, insurance, mortgage payments, all that stuff already accounted for. And it just wasn't there. And the market's hot. So I'm kind of like, let's start selling these and taking that cash and start rolling it into passive deals. And I'm looking at many different styles. Multifamily is kind of where I feel the lowest risk for the highest return is, but looking at even trying to find some hotel deals right now, because I think I don't think I'm the only one. There's gonna be a glut of hotel foreclosures coming in. And this is money that I don't really require to live off of. And I think there's gonna be some very large outsized returns that you can achieve from those versus my active portfolio.
Yeah. And I think it's really interesting to try and compare, right? So people might think, people think that they get a 15% return on a property, say, for example, a cash and carry, an ROI on a single family home. But I don't think they always factor in the right expenses, right? They'll be self-managing, like you said, they're not well capitalized, they don't have the right amount of reserves, and maybe something hasn't gone wrong in the last 9 months, so it does look like a 15, but what's going to happen next, right? Is you don't realize how much things cost until they happen a lot of times, so then like you said, a boiler goes out, a water heater breaks, and then you have to fork out for that. So all of a sudden your ROI comes down from a 15% to 6 or 7, but also what's the return on your time, right? It's a return on it. We always talk about return on investment. Sometimes people talk about return on equity, something that's not always talked about enough, I don't think. But it's also a return on your time and your sanity and your peace of mind, And another great thing about investing in syndications is that I think, especially when you're starting out, you're leveraging these people that if you pick, obviously we could get into the picking the right syndicators, that's a whole different subject. But if you do that right, I assume that you've done that, you picked a good operator, a good syndicator, they have the experience, right? They have the team, they have the deal flow, right? They do all, and you don't have to worry about the capital reserves because they're factoring that into their raise, into their underwriting. So you're leveraging all these things from them. Plus you get to enjoy all the benefits that we all enjoy in real estate. Plus, even more so in syndicating, if you're investing in a large apartment complex, the depreciation, the cost segregation that they do. So you're getting even higher tax write-offs, so what your returns are getting. So if you factor that in as well, it's not easy. It's not always easy to do an apples and apples comparison. I think it's a lot different to what people think. It's not as simple to compare the two, as a straight up
Yeah.
Madison.
And yeah, for my portfolio, again, for the most part, I bought them all so cheap that doing a cost seg studies was not worthwhile.
Mm-hmm.
To be quite frank, the least I've paid, and again, all of these houses needed work. These were BRRRR houses before BRRRR was a thing.
Mm-hmm.
But I paid $12,000 for a house. Now, granted, I had to put $25,000 into it to get it rent ready. But you know, I'm paying less for a house that's kicking off $800, $900, $1,000 in rent for less than I could buy a decent used car. Maybe even a new Honda Civic was going to cost me just as much.
Yeah.
So it definitely made sense at the time. But yeah, with these syndications, the tax benefits, which again, everybody's going to have a different scenario as to how much that tax benefit can really affect them, given their other investments and what their portfolio looks like. But it's huge, and it's typically not something that is achievable per se on, single family specifically, but even when you're getting to 8, 10, 12 units, just kind of throwing some ideas out there, that the cost to have the cost of the cost segregation study probably negates most of the benefits of it at that scale. Mm-hmm. It's not until you get to these huge complexes and you have 400 refrigerators, ranges, microwaves if they're provided, washer dryer units, that all of a sudden you're like, oh, I can depreciate those on 5 years, and that's a big dollar amount that I can, drain out of the income. But the other thing, that's, as I always talk to people day in and day out, it's like, that's great and good. Just to be clear, it is tax deferred. It is not tax free.
Yeah.
The IRS will always get theirs somewhere. And the only way they don't is if you die. And that's kind of an extreme scenario to try to get out of paying some taxes. But there are lots of advantages that you can achieve and ways that you can continue deferring on and on and on and on, to continue to reap those benefits year after year after year.
Yeah, so true, so true. So now the show is called Wrestling with Real Estate, right? Mm-hmm. So I have to incorporate some kind of wrestling themed stuff in here, right? So I'm going to ask you, if that's okay, some wrestling themed real estate questions.
All right.
So the first question is, what would your wrestling name be? If you had a wrestling name, what would it be?
I mean, I can't argue with Macho Man.
Okay.
Right? I know it's taken, so that's kind of a cop out, but that's what I'll go with.
No, what's old is new, right? And in all entertainment, you use what is old and you make it new again. So yeah, Macho Man, Evan the Macho Man, Polaski, yeah. Like that. Okay. Cool,
yeah, I need something with better alliteration, but I like Macho Man. I'll stick with
that. Cool. Now every wrestler has a special move. What is your special move in real estate? What is your superpower in real estate?
Put me on the spot.
What do you think your biggest strength in real estate?
I think, and this is a kind of lame wrestling analogy, but I like educating people. So I like being able to talk to people just about real estate. Like, let's talk about anything. You want to talk about cost segregation studies? Cool. Let's talk about that. You want to talk about deal flow? Great. Let's talk about IRRs. Let's talk about cash on cash returns. So the informant, I'll be like the guy in the corner that's like telling the other guy in the Royal Rumble it's time to come in and help direct traffic.
Okay, cool. Yeah, cool. And I think that's important, and that's how you create relationships as well, right? If you're able to educate people and help them, that they're going to be a friend and going to want to stick around you, right?
Yeah.
What's been your biggest body slam you've taken in your real estate investing career?
There's kind of two. So with my single family portfolio, it was when I had hired a management company, or ultimately what turned into 4 different management companies, and each one got progressively worse than the prior one. And it was actually a series of acquisitions that kind of led down that road. From the other big one is my wife and I, so this was a flip story, we took a pretty big loss on one deal. And it, it was a whole slew of, as you'll find, I've taken some pilot training, and it's not any one thing that causes a plane to go down. It's a series of events and bad decision after bad decision. And this was the second deal we used hard money lender on, one of the biggest projects we ever did, on top of doing it in the neighborhood that we lived in. It was right around the corner from us. So I think we saw the value that other people, we over exaggerated apparently what we thought the property could sell for. And then back to the big budget, the biggest rehab with additions and everything, everything went over budget. And then we missed the summer selling period and started to get into fall. So it ended up staying on the market for 5 months before we finally had the deal that went through. So it's just, ultimately our loss was almost exactly the amount of money that we paid to the hard money lender between, points and interest. So we've definitely become more conservative and less willing to work with hard money lenders. They serve their purpose. I have no qualms with it, but it's, you take on some risk if things don't all line up when you have 12% interest out on the property.
Yeah. But it's one of those things, right? It's a necessary evil with that, right?
It gets people started, and if things go well, your returns are astronomical. But it's, again, I think everybody goes through the process of, when you start in real estate, any business really, you take a lot of risks, and that's fine. You need to. That's the only way to continue growing and to grow fast and get yourself out of the point that you need to take as many risks. And then as you continue to mature, you go from hard money lenders to, okay, I'm going to buy the property in cash and take out a traditional construction loan where I can pay 6% instead of 12%. And you start changing your view of deals as you are in the industry longer.
Yeah, very true. Was there a moment that you were standing on the top rope, getting ready to jump, but you were scared? What was it, and how did you overcome it?
The biggest fear that I remember having was when I was buying my first property. And again, this was, my wife and I had owned, we were living in the house we owned, so we had bought a property before. This was the first investment property. And I just remember, thankfully, the market at the time was in the middle of the recession, 2010 or 11. And you could tour a property, go home, sleep on it, schedule another showing, walk through it again. But I remember ultimately putting an offer in, and the realtor calling me back and telling me that the bank had accepted my offer because it was a foreclosure, bank-owned property. And all of a sudden, I'm like, what just happened? Like, what did I miss? Really, the question was, what did I miss? Because, it was still a foreclosure. Even though in the recession, you're still having to make cash offers, no inspection contingencies. You just bought a house. And there were lots of seasoned investors who didn't buy this house. So why is this newbie getting it? And what did I miss that's going to cost me a lot more money than I'm anticipating? It all worked out, thankfully. But it was definitely a big fear, to, particularly when they told me I actually got the property. Because now all of a sudden you have to execute on it. It's one thing to make a bunch of offers, but when you have to actually start executing, that's a lot harder.
Yeah, I can completely relate. I remember my first property and was, okay, I'm excited to make the offers. This is going to be great. And then once the offer is accepted, you're like, oh, I have to go through with this now, and then you start thinking of all the stuff that can go wrong and everything. And then ultimately you realize that, that's not the case, and that it's not this horrible thing. And you're glad that you did, but it's definitely that first deal is quite scary.
It's that. And as we were discussing briefly, it's, one thing that helped me was, I think I had $80,000 or something, and the purchase price was 22. So like, I wasn't stretching to get the deal done. I had the money for the rehab, and it ended up coming in right around within a couple $1,000s of where I thought. But back to real estate. Being undercapitalized is the fastest way out of real estate. And so I made sure I had, this was a property that I thought I was going to spend about 15 to 20 on. And so I'd be all in about 40, and I had $80,000. So I had wiggle room of double to screw up. The returns would have been way worse, but I would have been able to get through it. Where if I, thought I needed 40 and I only had 37, I was going to hope it was going to work. It would have maybe worked or would have backfired.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. Well, thank you for sharing all that. It's been a really, really interesting interview. We could have done part 2, part 3, part 4. There was so much stuff that I wanted to dive into, but I was trying to respect your time and maybe.
No, I appreciate it. We'll definitely follow up again and dig into, like I said, because I've done the passive route, I've done the small single family route, I've done the flips, and they're all fun to talk about because they're all slightly different. In different ways that my wife and I in particular tackle them. So it's always fun, and I enjoy talking about it.
Cool. Me too. Before I go, how can people get a hold of you and reach you if they want to find out more about what you're doing?
Yeah, so they can reach me. I've actually deleted I haven't formally deleted my accounts, but I've deleted the apps. So honestly, the best way is probably through email, which is evan@ashcroftcapital.com. Or on Bigger Pockets. I am active on Bigger Pockets, just Evan Polaski, and you'll see this space. So, connect with me there. That's a good place to connect with me as well.
Cool. Well, thank you for wrestling with real estate, Evan. It's been a lot of fun today, and have a great day. Hopefully I'll be in Cincinnati next week and we can meet up then.
I look forward to it. Thank you so much for having me.
Cool.